Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
All right, Dean, is your city smart yet?
Smart? I don't know.
Do we even know what that means at this point?
Let's define smart city, right?
Yeah, I don't even know how to really define
maybe
it.
I live in a dumb city. I have no idea.
I mean, does it have like an advanced degree?
No. Yeah,
is
right.
it good at trivia? Does it win at bar trivia nights?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I drive around, lights are on, things are happening, but I don't know how smart it is.
You can make it one end to the other without anything going dramatically wrong.
I live in a suburb. You know,
That's
I think
true.
Urban parts are where smart cities are getting some run, right?
That's true. Yeah. So that's our topic today. We're going to talk about smart cities.
Okay.
We have Charlie Wu with us from Advantech. You might remember being on the show last year about edge computing, which obviously ties into this whole smart city thing.
Very much so.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because I feel like the whole smart city thing is one of those topics that we all were excited about and talking about for a few years. And then suddenly everyone's kind of backpedaled a bit. And we'll talk a little bit about that backpedaling and why we're not quite where people thought we were going to be and why.
Maybe a little bit there. Yeah, I got you.
And honestly, like this is one of those topics I've thrown out to lots of potential guests, and everyone's kind of been hands off. So kudos to Charlie.
Charlie stepping up,
taking the bait here. Maybe I don't know. Like he's willing to be the one to talk about with us. So we're going to talk a little bit about again why the smart city thing isn't quite where we think it was supposed to be, or what we expected the future of these cities to look like.
Okay,
we're going to talk about machine vision versus machine learning, the difference between them, why this is important.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
How smart cities are going to manage manage traffic, resource management, public safety, some of the little components of smart cities that maybe are a little more tangible and a little more realistic next steps from where we were. So
okay. Got it.
It's going to be good stuff. We're going to have a good conversation.
Yeah, all right.
All that plus our usual value to the VAR and what's tech connecting with us. It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, our guest today, returning to the podcast, Charlie Wu. He is the product supervisor for Advantech, and again, Charlie's an expert in all things edge computing. He was. I will link out to that episode of the in the show notes.
It was a very good one.
At the end here, I highly recommend checking it out. It was
Absolutely.
a good overview of edge computing and what it means. But Charlie, tell us, what have you been up to over the last year since we had you on, and what's going on in your world right now at Advantech?
Well, the usual. Technology space. We all heard about the great shortage of almost everything. So everybody's fighting, trying to get things done, try to get parts where it belongs. And luckily, we're not automobile manufacturer. We still get most of our components ready for our customer. I mean, they are suffering. We are suffering just like everybody else, but we make the best out of it.
No, he's been snagged in the supply chain issue too.
Yeah.
Who hasn't, right?
But the positive attitude you have about it, I like that. We're making the best of it, doing what we can. That's all you can do right now.
That's where we're all at, right? Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's get into this discussion about smart cities. And again, this idea of the whole smart city, it's been discussed for most of this century, I'd say so far. But it all still feels very nebulous, very futuristic. Like, again, as we were talking about up front, what does it even really mean?
Right.
What defines whether a city is smart? And before I let Charlie kind of help us explain where we are right now, there was an interesting story I read. And again, there's a lot of stuff I'm going to link in the show notes. There's some really interesting articles I came across. One in particular was at Toronto, who had a project in the works with Amazon Sidewalk Labs.
Right.
This whole sector.
No, it was Alphabet. I thought it was like a
Alphabet. You're right.
It was
Yes,
a spinoff of Google
My
or
bad.
something
Yeah, it was
like
a Google
that.
word. My bad. And this whole waterfront high-tech neighborhood called Quayside.
Yeah,
they were
it was
going to
be
put together.
the smartest of smart cities.
Check out the link and just look at the pictures, and their vision of what it was supposed to look like, all this cool green space. It was what you think of when you think of the idea of a smart city and a modernized high-tech neighborhood. Well, they ended up scrapping that. And a big part of it was the data collection angle. Because Canada especially is, a little more in tune than a lot of other places, especially more than the US, on, safeguarding data and protecting privacy of its citizens. And essentially, it's funny, you'll have to read the quote from Google or from whoever the project manager was, kind of their way of saying, well, we had to back off this project for various reasons. And the article on Surface said basically, too long didn't read. They wouldn't let us data mine an entire city for advertising, so we bailed. So that's kind of their way of
That's the
suggesting.
synopsis.
That's
Yes.
that's the reason why this didn't happen.
I gotcha.
So Charlie, help us out here. Tell us, why is the whole smart city movement kind of seem like it's kind of slowed to a crawl? What's holding back these advancements? Is it just the data and the privacy thing? What else is going on right now?
Well, John, you pretty much hit the nail right on the head. Data privacy is definitely going to be one of the bigger concerns. And during our discussion, I got some points I want to try to come across, not to be too scary, but those are what is concerning. But another thing that you said about earlier, like what happened in the past 2 years? Well, what happened to the past 2 years to everybody on this planet? The pandemic. Everybody is staying at home. Nobody's going anywhere. And since nobody's going anywhere, then therefore a lot of infrastructure, although I know there's a lot of highway constructions around the neck of wood that I live at, a lot of basic infrastructure stuff are being done. But as far as the smart city stuff goes, if nobody's there to use it, then the demand for the smart city is really not there. And therefore, that's why my take is why it take a little bit of a backseat. But since we're now returning back to the normal, hopefully, so in this case, I do see that the smart city is going to start to pick up. Not to mention that from my perspective, I think some of the stuff as far as smart city that is already happening, we just don't really feel it in our day-to-day life. Some of the good example that I can give you is for example, smart electric meters. Most of our houses now have it. Um, that doesn't require manual labor to come out to read your meter. It feeds those data directly back to the power company. When you go to some of the parking structures, or if you're driving on a toll road, it used to be that you need to have a transponder in your car. And right now they have the camera installed as part of a Vision AI. Now it can actually recognize your license plate. So they charge you based on the license plate that you drove through and contact you based on that. Some of the other things that you can see that's happening in the background, such as like a waste management, such as water, sewer, clean up, those type of things, like measuring the temperature, measuring the um, contaminants, all those are happening in the background. It's it's underneath us, it's happening around us, but it's not something that we feel day to day. It's not something that we can pick up our smart device and actually use the app and interact with. So that's why people are feeling, okay, the smart city is not there yet, but my take is it is happening. It's just not something that we feel based on our day-to-day life.
That's a really good point. So it's not like a knitted together smart city per se, if you will, right? Like what Toronto is going to build, literally from the ground up, where it was just the smart city from everything from heated sidewalks to whatever. That's a really good point, Charlie, that really we kind of are living in some aspects of a smart city. I mean, in the opener, I was saying, we live in a dumb city, but no, I mean, there's a lot of technology. Yes, I've got the smart meter, thing that's going there. And in fact, when you look at it, there are certain areas. Energy is one of those areas where cities are getting smarter, right? Water, wastewater, a type of thing. So these are like just good old traditional city services, I guess, right? Policing, telecommunications. These are some of the things that are getting smarter, to use the air quotes around it. But I don't know if that means, that everybody's going to have drone delivery service as a city function, right? And that would be a smart city. That takes a lot of knitting to make that happen. And there's a lot of issues, I think, that, trying to pull together what I would call an aggregate smart city, right? So there's pockets of smartness, but an aggregate one, it was interesting because I came across a survey, and they talked to 50 city leaders about some of the challenges of they're seeing in implementing a smart city. And what would you think are some of the top things? Well, the solution requires multiple departments departments to align. That's really hard to do in a government, right?
That's hard to do in a single business, let alone an entire.
It's hard to do in a family.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, right? 74% of people, respondents said that progress is slowed by elections or other political cycles. See, there's this whole
funding gets changed,
people and politics element of it.
Yep.
Not to mention the privacy concerns that so the data is one, not only on the privacy, but also city systems don't talk to one another. That's 32% of the respondents said that's an issue. So it's a really complex issue, right? When you start diving into what a smart city is. And I think to Charlie's point, how that's manifesting itself is just this pockets of smartness, but I don't know that we're knitting it all together.
I'm with you. And to your point, I think our VARs can relate to this one. Anytime they have any kind of project they're working on, again, whether it's a single business or, maybe they've got multiple locations or something, there's all these people you have to get on board, all the different departments you got to work with. But again, you amplify that by, I don't know, 10,000, maybe even 1 million when you get into government, and especially when you get into an entire city with all kinds of different people, all kinds of different departments. And I think what this comes down to is I feel like the talks that we've had about smart city over the last 20 years or so, we often think of it and kind of picture it in our brains as like some futuristic looking city, something you would see in a science fiction film, like, where there's
automated transportation.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's automated. Everything's. We used to joke about Minority Report, our unofficial film of the podcast.
Yes, that's right.
And it was filled up with all kinds of cool technology in different places that we're like, hey, that stuff's neat. And I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of this idea. But to Charlie's point, I'm glad he referenced this, is this idea that it's a lot of little steps.
Yeah.
There's little bits and chunks of things you got to do that over time start building out what eventually is a smart city. It's not going to look that way that we think. It's not going to be like this Toronto project where someone's literally trying to build from the ground up something that is high tech from top to bottom all the way through. And I think maybe that's the problem, is maybe people need to start backing away from this idea that we're going to just completely build futuristic cities in some way and understand like, hey, there's an existing infrastructure that we have to build stuff into over time, and eventually it will get us to where we want to be in that futuristic city that we're talking about here.
But isn't it interesting that Toronto pushed back? And oh, by the way, how did they not see this coming down the road with Alphabet being like the main funding mechanism? Of course, they're going to mine the data. That's what people push back on. It's like, oh, we don't want this to be the smart overlord city, right? Where the government knows everything that's going on, type of a thing.
Exactly. All right, so then let's talk about the technology behind smart cities here. And there's really two main concepts, and this is where I want you to really help us out here, Charlie, to kind of flesh these out. Machine vision and machine learning, which, kind of sort of sound the same. Maybe people don't quite understand the difference. Help us understand how you differentiate between these two and again, how they both enable the smart city.
Okay. So before I go into the difference between the two, just to kind of lay some background to it, is that smart city, from my perspective, is machine vision is one of it, machine learning is one of it, and machine learning actually deal with more than the machine vision, because now you have a lot of data that are collected by sensors like temperature sensors, vibration sensors, alignment sensors, for example, and that's not necessarily something had to do with the machine vision, but it's still part of a smart city function. But specifically with some machine vision, we need to go back and take a really quick at how AI is actually working. So starting from the data collection bit, which is what the machine vision actually is doing, is collecting all sorts of different vision data, like the shape of the different items, condition of different situations, and so on and so forth, because those are part of a data collection. And once those data are collected, then based on those data, then you can start doing some pre-trained models, or create some pre-trained models that's designed to do certain type of AI action. For example, traffic monitoring, traffic control, facial recognition, if you will, and all those ties into part of a smart city function. So now, of course, the whole AI is kind of like continuous learning process. So it's not going to stop and say, okay, I now have the model, it's good to go, and just follow the model. No, nothing is going to be of any issue. That's pretty much the furthest thing from the truth, because we see Tesla running into a wall because it doesn't recognize what a wall is. Right? So in this case, the vision data needs to be continuously updated. That's where the machine learning comes in. So now you have on the front or the edge side, now you have the machine vision. That's the machine that has multiple camera connected to do various different type of application. For example, the autonomous vehicle is one. Traffic control is another one, and just security monitoring is another possible cases. And all those, we have some use case around the globe where they're using our computer connecting to different cameras, running different AI models, and doing different things. Now, those data can sometimes be wrong. Like if it recognizes something that it never seen before, doesn't know what to do with it, then those goes back into the machine learning part. The machine learning part is to collect those new additional data to help do the data analysis to allow the pre-trained model or the model designer to continue to refine that model to include all those new bits, and therefore it allows the company who created those AI models to further refine and make those models more accurate. Then we can avoid more or less having Tesla running into a steel vehicle or truck, or I've seen something similar to that fashion. So those type of things can now be avoided because now you have new data that's coming in.
And these are going to be very important things as we move forward. I mean, going back to the machine vision part, and we've talked a little bit about that, and obviously our understanding of machine vision and how it's being utilized is really important. But maybe this is a good time to kind of step into the data aspect of it, right?
Right.
Like the personally identifiable data, that's an issue. And I think that some of these people in Toronto were recognizing that, right, as a component of, hey, what's going on here? So, and Charlie, maybe your take here, I think the industry is already getting savvy, at least here in North America, around people's desire to have non-personally identifiable information when it comes to these aggregate things such as, people monitoring or your crowd control or things of that nature, which a smart city would want, right? I mean, we want smart traffic lights so that if, so that it can think smartly about how to move cars faster through a system or something like that. But we don't want it to be personally identifiable. And so I think that's really going to create this interesting world as it relates back to the machine vision, the AI that's going on, and the ability for the programmers to develop these types of things and keep that off to the side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to your earlier joke about the whole Google Sidewalk Labs thing or whatever, this idea that you relied on a company whose primary way of making money is data brokering, essentially.
Exactly.
Collecting data, advertising, and feeding ads to the right people.
Behavior information.
Exactly. You kind of had to expect that was something they were going to want to get out of this deal. And I think there's an important lesson there, for our VARs or for anybody who wants to work in these particular situations to make sure that your partners kind of have a plan in place for data privacy and security, because this stuff's going to come up. These use cases and these situations like this, as they keep recurring and the word gets out, anytime you're approaching somebody about this situation, either they're not going to care, in which case you kind of might want to worry about that too, or they're going to be very concerned about this privacy angle, and they're going to be asking you, how are you going to adjust for that? Or
That's right.
What kind of data are you going to collect? What are you going to do with the data that you collect?
Yeah.
So it's a good point.
It's going to be, it's more than a talking point. It can be a deal killer, right?
Exactly.
If it's not addressed very soon on. And I agree with Charlie in the sense that, machine vision is going to be critical for these smart cities to continue to develop because of the way AI is going and how it's developing. But we really got to get our heads around that and be cognizant of it up front. Yeah.
Now, Charlie, you referenced traffic management. And I want to kind of get into some of maybe the specific angles of technology that could be the smart cities of the future kind of thing. The stuff that actually is practical beyond.
And this is practical, if you ask me. Very practical.
So maybe places where our VARs could see opportunities in the future. So let's start with traffic management here, and especially again, you mentioned autonomous vehicles are taking to the road. They're going to keep growing. This is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away. Let's just put it that way. Like we know the future is electric. The future is autonomous vehicles in some way or another. How does that work with the cities of the future? What what's going to happen as these vehicles take the road? What does traffic management of the future look like? Where, what kind of technology is going to need to be in place to make that happen?
Every time someone talks about traffic management, for some weird reason, the first thing pops through my mind was one of the older movie called Demolition Man, or the newer movie called I, Robot.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
They all have a autonomous vehicle. All you have to do is sit in there, and will drive you to the place that you're going. You don't need to do any control. In the sense that, if that being the case, then would it be easier to use a more so of a public transportation type of approach instead of individual transportation? That becomes a personal liberty versus efficiency, those type of comparison. But when we look at traffic management these days, we're thinking, from my take, I think about a few different things. One is how to manage the traffic that we have today, and then moving on to how to improve it, and then also how do we improve the public transportation, maybe moving on in the future. And that's going kind of back to what both John and Dean that you have talked about earlier, in regards to personal data, how happy people are being about those data being collected from them. So in this case, let's starting from regular standard traffic that we have today. Autonomous vehicle that's going on. We are looking at say different things, like, for example, as I mentioned earlier, the hazard that we have on the road. Um, those are going to be the part of a pre-trained model. We're going to also try to identify different type of vehicles and different type of um, objects on the road, so that can be synchronized with the autonomous vehicle. So the vehicle itself needs to now connect it to a bigger network, if you will, in order to make sure that those vehicle has the most updated information, and they can avert traffic accidents. They can identify different items on the road. That's another one of the things that needs to happen in order for the autonomous vehicle to work or function more flawlessly. Then there's also the traffic management part, where now we're looking at machine vision to help identify the traffic pattern, how to resolve that traffic pattern if it started to clog up, and just how to manage the signal lights to improve the general efficiency. Because autonomous vehicle, although sounds great, but not everybody's having it. Most of us are still driving the regular um, gasoline powered vehicle, so that will be something that's not going to change, at least not within the next decade or so. So in this case, those are the things that needs to happen, meaning a lot more edge computing, a lot more camera related connected to the edge computing. And then finally, we talk about the public transportation. Um, for example, one of the possible scenario is you can go into a train station, bus station, and you can pay fare by simply facial recognition. So you are there and you enter this subway car, or you enter into this bus at this time. You are moving from one location to the other location, and then your fare are being collected based on how many stations you have moved. And though those can actually be done by facial recognition, but is the law allowing this? Is the personal privacy concern allowing this? That's another aspect that people are concerning. Now going back to like how you drive on the road, going back to how intrusive public can actually accept. We now have for example, now in order for that to happen, maybe every car needs to equip with some kind of a GPS communication, and you might want to let out some of the control of your vehicle, like are you allowing someone to take over your vehicle in order to avert an accident that's happening ahead? So that goes back to how much control, how much privacy you're willing to give up in order to make a more autonomous um, society that's based on machine AI and AI vision.
Really interesting. I mean, when you think about some of those aspects, right? It pulls in that human factor. Yeah, we're still with you, Charlie. So, when you take a look at it, how much control do I want to give up? I can kind of see a world where, okay, maybe if I'm getting on a highway, there are certain zones, if you will, within a city that, hey, if you're going to drive here, you got to give up your
kind of thing.
But I can see that being kind of an issue. Like if I get out into the wherever, I want to drive my car, right? Or at least today, that's where people are going to be. I can't imagine somebody from wherever, somewhere not in an urban setting, saying, "What do you mean you're going to drive my car for me?" Kind of a thing. So that really does pull in some of that. But as Charlie was talking, I was thinking to myself, this is like the ultimate asset management. I mean, it's a car, right? So it's an asset. It would be managing that. But in all seriousness, to your point, Charlie, I mean, it is going to take edge compute in order to run these types of things. And so, as we talk to our resellers, of course, they're using edge compute and AI in warehouse settings and transportation logistics settings. But I can see this starting to creep in. Maybe, you think about smart cities and get really excited about it. Then you're like, oh, man. I mean, just the whole driving thing. How would we manage traffic? That would be really difficult to not make everybody mad, piss everybody off, hey, we're going to take control of your car. No, you're not taking what? I can just see that happening. So maybe that's a little bit down the road, but there are some aspects of it. Maybe there could be. I don't know.
Well, Charlie referenced iRobot, for instance. And whenever I see these sci-fi films that show like the highways of the future, and it's like a 16-lane highway with like thousands of cars moving at super high speeds, and they're high-tech futuristic vehicles. They all kind of look the same. And I look at that and go, you do understand we live, especially in the U.S., this is a kind of a car culture kind of environment. Like you go out to LA, everyone's proud of their different vehicles. They're used to driving them.
Right.
You're not even just the hurdle of trying to figure out how to manage traffic flow like that, which is its own nightmare.
Right.
But how do you break the instinct for everyone to have their own individual vehicles?
Well, I already got the plan.
You do? Let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, so the cars of the future are going to fly, aren't they? So anything that flies is going to have to be in this world that Charlie was just painting, where it's got to be, you got to be synced up to the master thing. Oh, if you want to do the old style driving on those dirt roads that we're not protecting anymore, all right, you can do that.
All right, Dean, let's maybe figure out the whole traffic management, local driving autonomous vehicle thing first before we even remotely consider flying cars.
Fair enough.
We got some time before we get there.
All right.
So, all right. Well, hey, you mentioned asset management just a moment ago. So I want to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's an important part of city planning and smart city planning for the future. So Charlie, help us out here for resource management, asset management. How does machine vision and the machine vision and the learning help city managers to allocate their resources properly?
So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of especially related to resource. A lot of those are done with sensors that's in different places, so it may not be specifically machine vision, but computers and also sensors, part of the AI learning network is still there. Though we need to look at what are considered utilities, right? So now we have power, water, fuel delivery. We have on the public space access, like parking, accessibility, and also recreational area, like when you go onto the beach, go onto the park. It's a hot sunny day and a lot of people want to congregate at the beach. Is there too many people at the beach, or those like crowd management type of situation? All those are going into resource management for the city, and the city manager creating events needs to take all those things into consideration. So as I mentioned, those things are like when we look at managing the water delivery, okay, managing the fuel delivery, managing the power, or like the waste management. How do you take care of the trash? How do you clean up the sewer, like a sewer treatment plant? All those things are being currently managed by the computer, controlled by the computer. So there are data being collected. It may not be vision related, but it certainly some of them certainly could be. So, like for example, cameras looking at the parking spaces to figure out what parking spaces are available. But that may be easier doing with sensors. So in this case, can those be managed by a smart network? It certainly could be. Let's take a look at parking management, probably the easiest one to tackle. So, like in the Advantech headquarters over in Taiwan, you're going into the headquarters. It has that license plate recognition right at the gate. And since you are a visitor, Dean, you're a visitor, John, to Advantech, you will be greeted with a message, welcome to Advantech, Dean, welcome to Advantech, John, right on the display. And it will tell you, please park your vehicle at parking space B3, for example, because there is already a parking space reserved for you. That can extend to a public like a public resource type. So how many of us had that experience? We go to a popular tourist destination and you drive your car around and around the block and just cannot figure out where is a parking space. And lo and behold, you found one, but somebody cut in front of you and snatched that parking space away. I mean, some serious road rage sometimes span from that.
That's right.
So you're telling me smart city technology can cure road rage? Because I'm all for that.
That goes into how, like I said, that goes into how much control you're allowing your government to have on you. Back in the earlier traffic management session, I talked about what if you have GPS, you have like a GPS controller in the vehicle, very accurate one, and you actually allow them to drive your car for you. That kind of avoid them having to control your car. That kind of avoid having to deal with other people because everything's well managed. And we go right back into iRobot, demolition man type of society. Everything's well managed for you. Don't have to do anything, but is that something people want? And going back to this one, can this be done? Sure. You have your GPS locator in your vehicle, and then you actually have some kind of barrier, if you will, on the parking spot. So when you're assigned to that parking spot, then your vehicle will be identified and only your vehicle will be allowed to park into the parking spot. Even if some other cars swing by and see, oh, there's a parking space, I want to take that. But there is already something preventing them from doing it. But then again, that goes right back to, are those type of the control that we are willing to give to our government for the convenience of our life?
There you go. Yeah.
Interesting question there. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it will get down to the parking level kind of.
I kind of like that idea.
I do kind of like that idea.
I think I'm okay with that one. You know,
driving around the mall and somebody, but if it could thwart that person from, taking that spot, yeah. But it is highly inefficient driving into an airport or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you got to spend 10, 15 minutes trying to find a parking spot. Man, there are obviously some good that could come out of a smart city like that. But on the machine vision side, for sure, right? If we can people count, we can car count, just like they're doing right now with license plate recognition and car counting and stuff like that. Yeah. So
I want to take a quick second to kind of note the wastewater research and paying attention to what's happening in waste, because this is a topic I've kind of been paying attention to over the last couple of years. I heard it come up, during obviously the height of the pandemic as a way that, that researchers and government officials could start keeping an eye on where potential spikes were going to happen. Because apparently, if you're testing wastewater on a regular basis, you can potentially identify, where something's happening in the waste, where you can pick up on, viruses, you can pick up on certain bacterium or whatever, and identify, all right, there's, a growth of this virus and bacteria starting to occur in the wastewater of this particular area. A pandemic spike, or a spike in certain illnesses or whatever is expected to follow, because you tend to see that before the actual symptoms start occurring and the breakout starts happening. So, and recently enough, actually, this is happening again in New York, where they've started noting polio in wastewater, which is terrifying in its own right.
Right.
I thought polio was not a thing really anymore.
Yeah.
But apparently, that's again something they've identified in wastewater and have advised officials to start, paying attention and maybe, ramping up some booster, programs or whatever as needed in order to combat this. And that's one of those, again, tiny little aspects of the smart city that I think we should pay more attention to and understand like where that can fit in, because it's the little stuff that can just improve our lives.
But to Charlie's point, though, it's going to take some mental changing too, because, as you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, well, the overlord would go in and say, well, the insurance companies could say, well, this neighborhood is not as healthy, as this neighborhood over here. So your insurance rates are going up.
And let's be honest, inequalities will, be ramp up and occur in a lot of places.
It's like, what?
Again, it's funny because, there are many situations, I think, in society and in human life where we willfully give over any sense of privacy without even thinking about it until we're forced to think about it for some reason. When a data breach occurs or when a news report comes out and you realize what had actually been done. And again, the same people who will go on Facebook and post millions of pictures of every facet of their lives and talk nonstop about everything they do every single day are also the people that will scream, "Don't you dare take my picture as I'm walking down a sidewalk somewhere."
Interesting stuff.
It's interesting, and that actually I think kind of does blend into our final topic here. The idea of public safety. So there's a lot of opportunity to make first responder technology smarter, but I do think this is also another place where people get very concerned about privacy issues. I know we talked about that. We had an episode about facial recognition, about how law enforcement's using that. You've heard these stories about the Ring cameras on people's doorbell cameras or whatever,
and police asking for that.
Police have been asking for that information. It's been handed over without even asking the owner necessarily. So, Charlie, from your perspective, talk about public safety. Where does this new, smarter technology fit in, and also again, where are there still privacy concerns?
I guess when we talk about public safety and how the AI, vision AI, can be used for those applications, I kind of just have to brush the privacy aside and think about if everything is in a perfect world, nobody's going to be using those data for like a malfeasance intent or anything like that. Then in this case, then actually a lot of things can be done with vision AI. Like, for example, starting with facial recognition. Are we able to utilize that to identify potential troublemakers? That's one of the possibility that we can use. Then we can also use the vision AI to going back to the pre-trained model on how AI is supposed to work, right? So we can identify, okay, what looks like a car wreck, what looks like a car fire, what looks like a building fire. And when we have those data building in, then we can actually use the vision AI, machine vision AI, to kind of identify and alert the first responder. Doesn't matter if it's law enforcement, doesn't matter if it's EMS or fire department. So they can be on their way even before someone pick up their phone and dial 911 and try to report what's going on. And those data, since it's now everything's live feeded, so it can actually be data streamed to the terminal like a tablet PC of some sort that's installed in those first responders vehicle. So they can especially if it was a like a big fire, the building fire, so to speak. So as they are approaching to the scene, some of the members of the fire department can already be reviewing that and try to figure out, okay, where are the nearest fire hydrants, so they can immediately get on it and have a plan to attack to take care of the situation before they arrive to the scene. So that can save time, that can help save life. But now I'm pulling back that privacy part. How willing people are accepting those. Okay with their face being recognized. Are they happy with their face are being in database? I mean, to be honest, I'm pretty sure every one of our faces already in some kind of database. You have a Facebook account, if you have a Instagram account, your name associated with your face is probably somewhere in the database. But we're not talking about government controlling of that database. Then in that case, we want to make sure that government can actually be very secure about our data. not really giving them too much credit over here. And then we are also want to assume that government will be very um, honest and not doing anything bad with the data. Once again, I don't have much faith over here. So that's where the concern is coming from. From good intention standpoint, technology is wonderful. It can do a lot of things. It requires a lot of taxpayers' money because when you were talking about implementing all those cameras, all those machines into the place to collect those data, it's a lot of money right out of our pocket. And then there's the data privacy concern. So when we combine those together, then we go back to the very early question: why is not happening fast enough? Because it's a lot of money that's not generating more money, and how willing we are to give up those information to the government.
But public safety is when you look at the surveys, public safety is the one that ranks high. And where would technology go into smart cities specifically? Right. Technology to what is the priority? Again, public safety being number one. And I think Charlie tapped on a couple great examples, whether it's fire, whether it's an accident. I mean, who would say no to, do you want the EMS there faster, or do you want to wait on this old phone and somebody actually dialing 911 and right? No, you want somebody there like now, type of a thing. And so, I can see that why those priorities are much higher and probably likely to get funding, to a certain degree, for smart city, quote unquote, technologies.
Yeah. And I can tell you, anytime we have done any kind of marketing campaign around first responder technology, whether it is police, fire, EMS, and a wide swath of technologies, from asset management to incident response, anything like that.
Right.
Those campaigns have done very, very well. That is a market that, and I'm kind of tipping a little value to the VAR here ahead of time. That is very, very much a market that is interested in trying out and testing new technology and finding better ways to do their job. So if you're looking for potential opportunities for some of the tech that you sell every day in a lot of other markets, if you haven't already, reach out to some of these first responders. And again, I know, no one likes to mess with the government side of things. There's like, it's going to be slow and
there's opportunity. All right.
But don't let that get in the way of your opportunity there. So
fair enough.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, we are going to add a little value to the VAR here about maybe where you can fit into the smart city discussion. Before we do that, I want to, as always, thank our TEConnect members, those who sponsor the TEConnect program, the podcast in general. Of course, thanks to Advantech for sponsoring this podcast and lending us Charlie today. And as always, if you like the show, if you like what you've heard today, you have some thoughts about the topic,
give us a rating.
Give us a review, whether you're on YouTube, hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any platform, if there's any option for you to leave some kind of a rating or review, please do so. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you think about the show. If you have thoughts on topics, if you're listening to this topic and saying, I want to learn a little bit more about that first responder technology, for example. There's always a link in the show notes that you can find to submit topics to the show. Just some recommendations of what you'd like to hear about. And honestly, I'm open to anything that we hear about. We had a great swath of them, maybe, 6 or so months ago, some of which we have used to bake some episodes out that we've done so far. But we want to hear from you. And just for doing so, whether we use your idea or not, we're going to send you a t-shirt.
A free gift.
A free gift.
That you can either use, give it to a friend. I mean, it's great.
A TEConnect podcast t-shirt. We'll send you one just for submitting a topic to us. That's it. All you got to do, go type a few things in, give us even a remotely interesting suggestion, and we will send a t-shirt to you.
There you go.
Whether we do it or not. And as always, if you want to stay in touch with us, you can always find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap up with our recurring segments. First of all, let's talk about the value to the VAR here, because again, we've had a great conversation about all the places where smart city technology could happen, places that could potentially be implemented, what is and isn't happening, whether things are moving fast enough or slow enough. So I imagine, Charlie, there's a lot of our VARs that are listening right now that are saying, all right, where do I fit into this whole discussion? Who do you think they should be talking to? What should they be keeping an eye on? What should just a run-of-the-mill VAR be doing right now to at least stay abreast of what might happen next in smart city technology?
Looking at VARs, the way I look at it is that they are the one who knows the market. They are also the ones that knows the connection, because mainly when we are talking about smart city, it's all about connection. Who do you know in the government? that are driving these type of changes. Where do Are they funded? Do they already have the voter approved referendum of some sort to give them funding to start these projects? That's where they are going to find those opportunities. That's where they can bring those opportunities to BlueStar and to us, so we can kind of put together some kind of a solution that's suitable for the application at hand, at least from the computer technology standpoint, and maybe working with um, some of our system integrators or some of our partners that can provide the software solution to that part to combine as a full and ready solution that's ready to go in there and try to solve the problem, if you will, because it's not going to be just the computer itself. It's not just going to be the sensor itself. It's not just going to be the software itself. It's going to be a combination thereof to complete the entire network. And that's where VAR comes in, is they are adding the value of bringing those opportunities and probably know the market, and maybe they know some of the players that's locally that can do the integration, and we can be introduced to them to expand our partner list. So I do see that they have a great value here.
Yeah, relationships, right, are always good to leverage. And I'll throw a couple more things and kind of pick up on what Charlie was saying there. You know, as I read in this survey, a solution requires multiple departments to align. So if you know that going into one of these situations, talk to them. You know, don't go talk to the waterworks department, think that you've got a perfect solution, but you don't have the mayor's office involved. You don't have the other people that are going to be in the decision-making process, right? There's all these departments that may have to have a say in it. Know that going into it and embrace that and do that. Also, lead with SaaS type of solutions. I mean, when you have these recurring solutions, you kind of thwart the procurement cycle that a government usually goes through, right? I mean, oh, we're procured on this and this project has been approved, but once it sunsets, you know, it might be another politician in later, it might go away. But if you have recurring, it's like it turns into the operational expense of doing the city, right? And so, and by the way, that helps you out a lot, be more nimble on including more newer solutions and stuff like that. If you're just updating software or replacing cameras with better vision or whatever it may be down the line, it'd help you there. So SaaS models are I think are a good key thing too.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar, and it goes back to when we were talking very early on about machine vision and learning the differences and contrast and comparison between them. And Charlie mentioned this idea of the fact that you're constantly gaining new data. You're always looking to keep feeding new data in order to keep improving, in order to keep to make the machine learning part of things better and smarter, so that it starts operating more efficiently and figures out how to solve for little problems as it goes along. Again, I think that all feeds into this whole SaaS opportunity of, especially if you're working with some kind of a partner who is really good at like the software analytics data piece of things, that can go in and say, hey, this is not a we're just going to go collect some data and then hand you a solution for your, whatever this is, for whatever aspect of your, your smart city you're trying to do.
Or whatever it is.
It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, one-time only sort of thing. There's going to be constant adjustments because, again, humanity doesn't operate under, we do the same exact single thing all the time and never make any changes and nothing ever, the ebb and flow doesn't change at all. So if that's the case, parking being a perfect example, maybe for some reason, whereas most days there were 1,000 cars that were regularly needing to park in this certain area, but suddenly because of a new office building that opens up, a new venue for entertainment opens up, now it's 2,000 cars a day. You can't have just created done the data and said, all right, here's what you need in order to implement a strategy for 1,000 cars a day. The end. Bye bye. It's working with partners that are going to keep on evaluating that data, and ideally have seen that trend happening. Like, hey, we noticed this is starting to pick up. We've noticed this entertainment venue is going to be opened in 6 months. We know for a fact from other projects that you're going to start seeing a lot more cars, a lot more parking. Let's start adjusting as we go along for that. So I think again, it's that opportunity to be that valued partner that stays ahead of the curve a little bit and helps identify, future changes and opportunities. And I think that SaaS model is what's really going to help do that.
And the partnering, right? All three of us stepped in on that.
There you go. All of us working together, one happy channel, just like always. So.
Fair enough.
All right. Hey, let's wrap things up as always with our favorite segment, What's Tech Connecting with You? This is where we get to talk about something in the world of science, tech, innovation, business, something that's caught our eye, got our attention. Dean, I'm going to let you kick off this week. What's Tech Connecting with You right now?
All right, here's my question to you.
Okay.
How much radiation is your smartphone emitting?
Probably more than I'd care to learn, but I guess I'm going to find out here.
That was a little grabber for me. I'm like, ooh, I haven't thought about that in a while. Well, okay, so the parameter used to measuring phone radiation emissions is the specific absorption rate, or SAR. It's a unit of measurement represented by quantity of electromagnetic energy absorbed into the body when using a mobile device. Okay, so the Council of European Union has set the radiation standard for 2 watts per kilogram of tissue, I guess, of mass, if you will. Okay. So do you have, and I hate to call out the manufacturers here, but if you have a Motorola Edge cell phone, that's 1.79. So not quite at the 2 watt. None of them are at that 2 watt.
So 2's the max, you're saying?
2 is the max.
Comfortable max.
Is the comfortable max that they have determined, that this European Council has determined to be the upper limit. You don't really want to go above that.
Right.
As far as safe radiation levels. And I still radiate, I don't know if anything is safe radiation levels. But, so if you have that particular phone, you might want to think about getting a different one. Some of the better ones are like a Google Pixel phone. Does pretty good. The lowest levels, you get into like the Samsung Galaxies. Or some of those. Huawei has, pretty low. Sony, LG. Those are some of the ones that are
we're Apple guys. Where do those fall? We're
Apple guys. We are just about in the middle, 0.99. So, that's where the iPhone, that's where the 13 Pro's coming in at. The 12 is about 0.98. So about middle of the road.
So just
I think you're fine.
A medium amount of brain scrambling going on.
Medium amount of yes, scrambling, burning, whatever, micro. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just tripped upon that. I'm like, ooh,
there is
hope this doesn't turn out bad.
Yeah, there's a grandfather or an uncle or somebody who lives off the grid somewhere that's sitting there saying, see, I told you so. I told you all these kids are walking around with these phones. You're zapping your brains.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what's Tech Connecting with me. Yeah.
All right. Charlie, what about you? What's Tech Connecting with you this week?
It's more so of how little I use my TV now these days.
Okay.
Yeah, when I'm thinking, okay, I have my smartphones, I have my tablets, and of course my kid is now glued in front of the iPad most of the time. He's starting to get interest into the movies, so we might reactivate that big old TV once again. But I really don't get to use the TV as often as I used to be, at least a while ago. I mean, that probably doesn't resonate with everybody else, but just that's kind of weird for me.
It resonates here. We have it on, but nobody's watching it.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like at night now, we're all on our mobile devices. We might be huddled around in the family room.
Right.
And the TV's on. Of course, my kids are poking fun of me because I'm watching PBS and Nova and stuff like that. But generally, everybody's either on their mobile device or something like that. So good point, Charlie. We have it on.
Right.
But
so it's
is
not
anybody
so much,
really watching it?
Right. It's not so much that we're just not watching TV that much or watching a screen. We've just shifted our screen attention elsewhere to different places.
There it is.
Instead of the big one in the living room, it's now smaller ones that we're holding in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
At least there's one thing. We no longer have to fight for the control of
That's a good point. Yep.
Great point.
Very good point.
Their favorite program right in front of them on their mobile device. So we don't have to fight each other. The only thing I have to concern is, all right, kiddo, eat up, hurry up, because they're paying too much attention to the screen and not eating.
Good stuff.
Yep. That's a very good point.
All right, what's Tech Connecting with you?
All right, so I remember a few weeks back, maybe you referenced some space junk and debris hitting the James Webb Telescope. All right.
No, this was micron level. But go ahead.
Micrometer size stuff. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, apparently there has actually been a study that says scientists calculate the risk of someone being killed by space junk.
What?
So this was a study published in Nature Astronomy that did a little bit of investigating into, the stuff that's in space, the stuff that's man-made that's up there, the stuff that's naturally up there that comes through and around our atmosphere and has potential to make it to the surface
and kill you.
Right now, they did mention that every minute of every day debris rains down on us from space, a hazard we're almost completely unaware of, but that microscopic particles from asteroids and comets patter through the atmosphere and settle unnoticed on the Earth's surface. Now, here's a funny stat for you. It adds around 40,000 tons of dust each year come from space debris.
Yes, I think I knew that. So it's like this astronomical number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, they also then reference but then to get into anything big enough to cause any kind of impact, whether it be
fair enough.
Mild damage, big damage, obviously the catastrophic, crater type stuff that asteroids in the past may have done is obviously very small. However, they did do this study where they did some mathematical modeling based on the debris that's in space, whether it's from rockets that have, the staged attachments or whatever, or satellites,
the International Space Station, as we've talked about in other podcasts.
You mentioned that last week. The International Space Station that may very soon decide to come plummeting to Earth or get forcibly plummeted to Earth. So all of this stuff combined, they basically came up with a 10% chance of one or more casualties over the next decade from space junk falling into Earth.
Whoa, come on.
That is a pretty large... Now,
so wait a minute, 10% chance of 1 in 6 billion?
One or more casualties, over the next decade.
Over the next 10 years.
So it's still, all things considered, it's a very small... percentage,
is a pretty small chance.
But 10% is still a bigger number than I would have expected.
Yeah, right?
Like if you told me it was like 1%, I would have been like, all right, that's still infinitesimally small. Now, the other thing they also pointed out is that because of the way we put satellites and other stuff up in the atmosphere and the way we engineer them to, be deployed and break apart or whatever, that unfortunately we tend to direct a lot of this junk towards the southern hemisphere. I'm sure there's no unfortunate bias that went into that, but basically they noted
there's more ocean down there. But anyway,
true. The study estimated that rocket bodies in particular are approximately 3 times more likely to land at the latitudes of Jakarta in Indonesia, Dhaka in Bangladesh, or Lagos in Nigeria than those of New York, Beijing, or Moscow. So, that's unfortunate. But so there, where we're potentially directing this stuff. But they did point out, there's a lot of effort to, mitigate this potential casualties, from ever happening. In particular, obviously, like where SpaceX and Blue Origin are working on, reusable rockets that come back to Earth. There's a lot of, this interesting article, like they mentioned a lot of different studies that are going on about how to clean up space junk, get more stuff, out of space, and also even engineer some different kinds of fuel cells where there might still be enough of a little bit of fuel that it's left over in order to reposition and move the junk after it's used its primary purpose.
And like shoot it way out?
To either push it out or to put it on a very specific course into our atmosphere that would allow it to burn up. Yeah, right. Like actually like move into just a low Earth orbit that would allow it to burn up in the atmosphere before it ever had a chance to start plummeting to Earth. So
there you go.
People are working on making this not a thing.
Holy moly.
But still a little bit alarming that there's 10%? A 10% chance of one or more person getting killed over the next decade by
10% chance of 1 out of 6 billion over the next decade. Got it. Okay.
So probably not, but I don't want to be that person. Charlie, do you want to be that one person that's the unlucky one?
No, but I do recall seeing a news of, I think it's somewhere in Australia, maybe. There was a big piece of black something that looks furry, and it's coming from a rocket of some sort. And then there's some farmer's farm. So it's like, what happened if I just happened to be there doing something? That is a little scary. I guess from now on, thinking about maybe putting some armor on top of the car.
There you go. Of course, at the speeds that stuff would have to be traveling, I don't know that you'd have to. It'd be some pretty impressive armor, I think, to protect you. So
this is true.
All right. Well, hey, that does it for us today. Charlie Wu from Advantech, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, folks, maybe keep your eyes into the sky. Look out for some debris coming your way. And
don't hold your phone up to your ear.
Maybe turn on that TV you haven't watched in a while and find something interesting to watch. Like, Charlie, if you need recommendations, I can tell you millions of different shows on streaming services to watch. I'm still a TV junkie, unfortunately, but so if you need some help, let me know. I'll be happy to give you some suggestions.
Thank you.
And until next time, folks, stay connected. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Advantech. All right, Dean, I know you're a pretty big fan of the Edge.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the U2 guy.
Oh, you're right. The
But I'm
great
a fan of him
guitarist.
too. Yeah, like he's
or the
fantastic.
Galaxy's Edge down in.
No, I'm not talking about that one either. I'm talking
okay,
like
got
edge
it.
computing.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Bring
okay.
this up a lot.
Yes.
And we just had a whole episode about smart cities, which you got to have, edge computing to enable that.
That only happens with Edge.
Come on,
That's
keep
right.
up. Keep up.
I'm keeping it. All right.
Well, Advantech is enabling faster, smarter computing at the edge and anywhere businesses need to perform with their newest and upcoming inference systems and fanless embedded box PCs. Now, these are powered by Intel and NVIDIA processors and a variety of connectivity options. Advantech's reputation for high quality and reliable products make them the perfect choice for the kind of compute power that enables edge computing,
Absolutely.
smarter
Yes.
city applications. There
Yes.
was an article I read all about smarter, or not smart cities,
yes.
smarter. I think I like that concept.
I like it.
So for applications like that, vehicular computing, and much more. So there's a link in the show notes to check out with a flyer to their latest options. Check out their website also at advantech.com or contact your BlueStar representative to discuss your computing needs.